Telecast, the TV industry news review.
Hi, I'm Justin Crosby, and welcome to this week's Telecast. On this week's show, Sarah Hemar, Executive Director at TV France International, joins me alongside Clive Whittingham, News Editor at C21Media. Peter White from Deadline joins us with the latest Hollywood TV industry news. And this week, C21Media's Girts Licis continues his world tour of TV's production sets. This week, looking at what scripted shows are back underway. It's all coming up on this week's Telecast. So my first guest on this week's show is Sarah Hemar, a familiar face to many in the industry who make the trips to MIPCOM and MIPTV, where she worked in Reed Meadem's Entertainment Division New Development Team, where she worked on the launches of MIP Cancun and MIP China, as well as the Cannes events. Sarah is now Executive Director at TV France International, the organisation concerned with the international promotion of French audiovisual content, bringing together more than 120 French companies active in the international market, producers, sales companies or distribution arms of broadcasters. Its mission is to facilitate the export of French programming through sales and international co-productions. And another familiar face to those who travel the world in the business of TV is Clive Whittingham, News Editor at C21Media. Clive's been at the company for 10 years and oversees C21's exhaustive news feed, as well as the outlet's factual content coverage. Welcome to the show, Sarah and Clive.
Welcome.
Hi, Justin. Thanks for having us.
Sarah, coming to you first, if we may. The French TV business, it's back in production. TV production has restarted in France. How have you managed that over there?
I've been quite amazed by the resilience and the adaptability of our industry. We are lucky enough to have great support both from the States directly through the unemployment system that has made possible that people be partially unemployed but still available. To get back very quickly in business when time comes. There is also the CNC, which is the dedicated institution to cinema and audiovisual, who has played a major role putting together emergency funds, talking with the insurance company to make all of this come together and create the best condition to kick off as soon as the sanitary condition allows. There's also been a lot of initiatives in kind of agility initiatives in terms of chronology of media. For instance, on the cinema side, some film that has been hit super hard by the lockdown of cinema theaters have been able to move much quicker to platforms, beneficiating of all the marketing that they have been able to put in place before the lockdown. And making audience differently. Obviously, different part of the food chain hasn't been hit at the same time and in the same conditions. So the production has to now kick off super quickly, but I mean they do, and it's quite amazing to see how they do. The distribution side of thing, which I'm more closer to, they have been working a lot. All those broadcasters and platforms being so hungry for content, they've been in discussion with everybody and making deals. So there might be an impact at different time. Now we are waiting to see how the production will catch up and give fresh content to the market.
France has been best known for its animation, international sales of animation. But that's changing, isn't it? Can you talk us through sort of the history of French content, why perhaps France has almost become a bit of an island in its own right, but actually in latter years it's really started to sell strongly internationally?
Yes, it's true, because in 25 years we have tripled the sales value internationally. So it's a big rise. It's also due to the explosion of broadcasters and different buyers. Obviously, basically we are getting better and more internationally spirit in terms of production, in terms of distribution. So animation is still like the locomotive of the sales. It represents 40% of global sales, and it's very stable as being the kind of key element in sales because of its diversity, its dynamism, our history in terms of comics, etc. So there's a lot for it opens up market also. For instance, in China, without animation, all the rest of the content wouldn't been able to go there on platforms. But then on documentary, for instance, it's quite stable for 6 years, the international sales, but they are also now getting more ambitious in terms of producing series and adapting the offer to international market, because in France we had this tradition of like a one-off content, but now they are moving to kind of licensing, ideas more, and this is more international in terms of the market. And last but not least, the fiction is really the genre that has taken off. Also because with all these platforms, the audience is now very hungry for that, and so are the broadcasters, obviously. But there's been a strong also support from the CNC, a lot of diversification in terms of format, in terms of stories, kind of style, etc. So now we are addressing a much wider range of production. The broadcasters, with their kind of long tail approach, can now buy content that are more specific to one audience and still being, having an audience success together. So, yeah.
Who knows? With French production back now, we may find in a few months that actually, the sales and exports can really, really kick off as well, if there's lots of domestic French drama content available. Clive, we had your boss, David Jenkinson, on an earlier show, and he talked us through his strategy for steering the business through the pandemic. You're news editor and obviously all the factual output for C21, and you're seeing firsthand how the industry as a whole has been coping from an operational perspective. You see all the news coming through on a daily basis, all the news that's been announced, the types of deals that have been announced. What's your main takeaway on that over the last 2-3 months?
My main takeaway at the moment is that we seem to be muddling through. We seem to be squeezing through as an industry. Distributors are having quite a good time, because if you've got libraries of content sitting there on the shelf, that's very handy to broadcasters that are going to have schedule gaps. So they're not doing too badly, although obviously their sales markets, the physical markets that they rely on, aren't happening. Producers, after that initial flurry of, well, we'll just do clip and archive shows and quick turnaround, and we'll film people on Zoom in their own homes, that seemed to last a couple of weeks, and then they realized the audience tolerance for it wasn't there. They seem to have gone into more of a development phase now, and they're just pushing things back and tiding themselves over with development, ready for it all coming back. Broadcasters, like I say, that initial flurry of let's do quick turnaround things for them seems to have subsided, and you're seeing things like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The Golden Girls, Scrubs, things that are available in big volume for small amounts of money with uncomplicated rights situations, are being used to just navigate the way through this. If I had £1 for every time someone on an interview has said to me, actually, we've been really lucky. I guess from a PR point of view, you don't put someone in an interview and if they're having a bad time, but
absolutely not.
that has come up a lot. But when you ask the follow-up question, well, how long can we continue in this holding pattern? How long can we continue just post-producing stuff that you've done and developing for the future? The answer tends to be around 6 to 8 months. So we'll see, because it's clearly not going to just be a stop and go thing. You're not just going to be able to turn the taps back on and off we go again. I'm inclined to think, sorry to be pessimistic, that television-wise, a lot of the pain from this is to be felt further down the road with the economic situation and trying to get production up and running with all these restrictions. Broadcasters are obviously going to have less money. The advertising market's going to be hit. So at the moment, actually, people seem sort of fine, but I think the pain is maybe still to come down the line.
As you say, distributors, they might not have a great deal to sell come sort of February, March next year. That's going to be their challenge, I guess. Do you see, Unscripted, we talked about as well on earlier show about unscripted, the opportunity for unscripted now, because scripted, obviously, big productions, more difficult to get off the ground in the pandemic, and lots of countries are still really in lockdown, whereas unscripted, a lot easier to put those shows together for smaller budgets, much more agile. Do you think now it's unscripted's time in the sun?
It can't be anything other than a good time coming up for unscripted. Drama is very expensive to produce, and there's an inevitable economic situation coming up, which means broadcasters are going to have less money, less ad revenue. Scripted production takes longer to get up and running. It takes longer to make a scripted show. So there's inevitably going to be that time lag, and broadcasters are going to have gaps in schedules that need filling before that. Scripted shows have many, many hundreds of cast and crew involved in production, whereas unscripted, we've seen really good unscripted shows and documentaries produced by two guys in the field, two guys and a camera. You can produce really good quality fiction content now. We saw after the writers' strike, when the drama dried up, that was the sort of a boom for unscripted in the US, but it was mostly that sort of constructed reality programming, which was very popular back then, which, not to be sniffy, but it basically had very little to commend it to anybody, that sort of stuff. I'm hoping this time around we've seen, both with, stalwarts like HBO, but also newcomers like Netflix and Amazon, Sky documentaries. There seems to be a real hunger among the audience at the moment for the real quality, in-depth, factual, either feature docs or serialized. They can be turned around reasonably quickly with small crews on smaller budgets and scripted, and often can be more compelling than dramas. I mean, I defy anybody to show me a drama more compelling than Three Identical Strangers or Don't Fuck with Cats. These are absolutely incredible and could be a real filler. It could be a great time for them, albeit with, like I say, budgets are going to be challenged moving forward.
Sarah, coming to your first story, this is about France's Media One unveiling plans for a new European content powerhouse that's just been announced in the last few days. Take us through that.
So Media One is already a big group in France. It's only been launched like 4 years ago, and it's across all segments of production, all genre, fiction, documentary, cinema, animation, obviously, distribution, and also editing channels and digital services. So it was already one of the main player in France, and we're really happy as an industry to see them take it to the next level, to be what they call a European powerhouse. They are taking stakes in different companies and doing acquisition too. So it's a big plan that goes, I think, through September or something. But so they are taking stake in a German company called Leo9, including some more TV channels and streaming platforms. And they are acquiring production company in Spain called Good Mood and Lagardère Studio in France, which was also a big player that was, for sale for some months now. And so they are really, changing dimension. And I think it's a good news for the French industry, which the structure of the industry is mainly based of medium and small companies. So having big giants on a European and worldwide level to compete in that super fierce competition of worldwide content is a good news for us, because it's going to open up international collaboration. They are looking for international co-production, and they are also going more strongly in unscripted than they were before, acquiring Troisième Œil, another unscripted production company in France. So it's I think it's a very good news for the industry altogether, and French reputation on the media market internationally.
It certainly is a big deal. I think the Lagardère Studios, it's reported about being around 100 million euros just for Lagardère Studios. So it's you're right. It's giving them that footprint with producers in not only France but Spain, Finland, Netherlands, and the other territories, as you say. So really interesting to see that. Clive, you're renowned for being one of the TV industry's biggest football fans and a dedicated follower of QPR, Queen's Park Rangers, a West London club. Football's back this week and actually has been in for a few weeks, obviously in Germany with the Bundesliga, but it's coming back all over Europe and the Premier League and Championship is back in the UK. Unsurprisingly, your story is about sports return to TV screens.
Coming at this with two hats on, really. The first one, like you say, is as a football supporter who basically has lived his entire life getting up every Saturday morning and travelling around the country to see his team play. And it's irking me somewhat that people are saying that football's back and it's going to lift the morale of everybody to see football back, because, frankly, for those of us that do actually travel to the games, I'm sure, rather than, I could easily just say, I support Liverpool, I support Man United, I support Arsenal, I support Chelsea, I support Tottenham. And, what I actually mean by that is I sit on the sofa, and when Liverpool or Tottenham or Arsenal come on, I cheer their goals more than anybody else's. But for those that actually do travel around and go to the games, football isn't back, and having to watch on some stream while your team plays without you, frankly, is like watching your girlfriend cheat on you. It's horrible, and I'm hating it. However, with my other hat on as the editor of a television business to business publication, I mean, it's self-evident why sport is important and why it has had to come back. I mean, it does seem odd. In the UK, we're still getting in the hundreds, new cases in the thousands, and yet we're carting squads of football teams, up and down the country to play football behind closed doors. But it's self-evident why, because football has become addicted to its television money, and television, vice versa, needs football to drive subscriptions. Sky and BT Sport, who have the rights to most of the professional football in the UK, both offered subscribers an option to freeze their subscription while the football and the other sport was off. And I took that up straight away. I cancelled my Sky and cancelled my BT Sport because there was no football and sport. So that's been the situation for them for 3 months. That's a big hit to the revenue for those two. I think Sky, just for the first 3 months of the year, which didn't really cover this because there was still football up to March, but even just the start of it in March, they had a 3.7% fall in revenues for the first 3 months of the year. I noticed there was an article in the Financial Times last week that said even though football is coming back behind closed doors, even though the season is being finished, that Sky are clawing back £170 million of their deal with the Premier League, which basically has driven the popularity of the Premier League and the wages of the players and all of that. They're clawing £170 million of that. And the international broadcasters that own the rights to the Premier League are also looking for £160 million back to cover just that 3 months. So you can see why they want it back. And there's going to be a similar situation, I think, in the US. You and I, Justin, have sat in enough panels at Real Screen and other events in the US and heard all about the state of US cable. We know the routine now. The subscribers are down, people are cord cutting, the ad revenues are down, and that in turn, there's more competition from streamers. That in turn is seeing the 10% profit margin that work for hire producers used to be able to get off an American series being eroded. That was going on before all of this. There's an economic problem still to come, which will affect that. And also, if you take sports and live sports away from US cable for a prolonged period of time, that's only going to exacerbate the problem. So you can see why they desperately need sports back. I think the NBA are talking about coming back on July the 30th for some sort of big end of season round robin tournament in Orlando. Major League Soccer in America is planning something similar. But Florida yesterday, I think 4,000 new COVID cases, the most so far. So it all feels very premature. It feels wrong as a football fan. It feels just wrong in general, looking at the situation in these countries. It feels way too soon, but you can see why they're trying to push and rush this through. I mean, can you see rounds and rounds of NBA taking place in Orlando with the state that Florida's in at the moment? It seems surreal, but you can see why they want it to happen.
Looking at the business of football and broadcasting, which, as you say, is so interdependent, we started to see perhaps movements, I think, a year or so ago, or even more, towards the Premier League in particular, looking at streaming has been an option. And obviously every club has got a huge fan base, huge international fan base in many cases. And we've seen new players coming in, obviously BT Sport, but Amazon have started to stream in the UK. And I'm just talking about the UK here, but we saw a deal this week for DAZN for the Bundesliga rights as well, which is a really big deal for them. We're seeing the Premier League between now and the end of this season. We're also seeing services like Twitch streaming Premier League games and lots of new players coming in. How do we think that's going to affect the fabric of the business of football going forward, not just in the Premier League, but internationally? Cord cutting, lots of money being handed back. What's next season or the next round of negotiations for football rights in particular? What's that going to look like?
It's been completely immune, hasn't it, over the past few years? However bad the economic situation has got, or however well things have been going, however badly things have been going, sports rights have just continued on that upward trajectory. And the product's actually no different. The Premier League is no better now in 2020 than it was in 2001. It's just that a player that you would have paid £5 million to buy and £20,000 a week to pay 15 years ago now costs you £58 million and £150,000 a week. Still the same quality of player and same quality of products. And, there's always just been that threat. Sky in the UK know that the football drives their subscriptions, and there's always been enough of a threat for them to keep paying, and now that threat comes in the form of Amazon or something like that, who are showing some Premier League football. It will be, I don't know the answer, but it will be very interesting to see whether football and sports rights survives again and is immune again to not only this shutdown now, but also the economic catastrophe that's coming around the corner.
Sarah, as Annecy Festival is taking place at the moment in a virtual format, it's fitting that your second story is about French animation. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but it's facing that digital revolution. Tell us about that.
Animation has always been at the forefront of all transformations in the media industry in France. And my take is that the digital transformation has started for them a long time ago, and it has, proven super efficient in this time of crisis because they have been able to adapt super fast in terms of production, etc. So they are the one genre that has suffered the less in terms of production. So of course they could only go until post-production, and then they were stopped, obviously. But they have been continuing on production remotely and also development, obviously too. And in terms of broadcasting, it's true that the digital sales are really taking off. The diversity of content in animation, and also animation being a kind of driving force for bringing audience to these platforms. Of course, kids are not subscribing, but parents are super happy to put their kids in front of the screens. And this target audience is not in front of linear TV. It is a key audience to attract the whole family. And having this range of product to offer, this strong license to offer to the world is key in the sales. So Zilam told us that 53% of their sales, like a year ago, was made from digital, and it rises in every producer's numbers. So also because of the structure of the audience, but also of the quality of the franchise altogether, it's key. And as I was saying, it's also opening up new markets. I was talking about China, but it's true in the USA, which has become the first market for animation in France. And this is a great news for the whole industry.
Yeah, certainly France as a country didn't exactly welcome the big American SVODs with open arms a few years ago. I read a piece in L'Express from 2018 that said that a time has finally come to rebel against the Americans, Netflix, and also Google, Amazon, and Apple. How is that playing out now, though? I mean, are they much more integrated into the production community in France?
It's just a time of transformation and adaptation. So it raises both big questions, and also expectation and excitement. It's a whole new market, so it's important. For instance, in India, whole animation catalogs have been sold all at once, but it's different revenue models. They have to, understand if it's worth. So they are trying and getting feedback, and it's a process. In terms of the big platforms, they are quite active in producing local content. But it's just taking off. The key question is how they will fit into our local system. We have a obligation for linear channels, so there is a kind of unbalanced system now with these type of players that has to be worked on, and we were in the process of changing the audiovisual law in France, but with the pandemic it's going to take some time, so they are keeping the aspects of the adaptation of the what we call la directive SMA, so it's the audiovisual media service directive that will bring obligation to all the GAFAM, but it has to be in process by September, I think, and this is very important because I think they will find their right place in our ecosystem when they contribute also to the creative dynamism, which they do for now, but not fully. So, but I know the discussion are on, and I understand that people are willing to find a way. They are here to stay, so they have gained so many subscribers, so many this audience is huge. We cannot work without them. It's not possible. So we have to find a way, and they want to fit also in the ecosystem. So I'm confident we will find something.
Okay, well, we'll keep our eye on that and see how these big fangs develop in France and work within that ecosystem, which is almost unlike actually any other major Western European country, I think, from a TV industry perspective. Clive, your second story looks at the current event circuit. What's working, what isn't, and what the future looks like for the TV trade circuit now the lockdown is easing in many territories. What's your take on that?
There's money in events for people that organise events. We're well aware of that. And it had got to the stage where, apart from Christmas, you could basically be at a television event, market, conference every week of the year if you wanted. You could always be on a plane going to, attending or coming back from one of these markets. Quite happy to write that feature or film that documentary if somebody wants to commission it for me. But I haven't had a lot of interest in it so far. But it had got to that point, and obviously that's all gone away now, and I am fascinated to see in what state it comes back in, because while there's money for people who organize events, there's not people who attend them are going to be cash strapped perhaps, and they're maybe going to look at this period where we were locked down saying, well, actually we didn't go there this year and it hasn't made that much difference. Do we need to go there again? Or alternatively, we didn't go there this year and it really has made a difference, so we absolutely have to go there next year. And which events come out of this well and which don't is really interesting. At the moment, we're seeing digital events. Sunny Side of the Dock is happening virtually this week, and it's the first time so far I've seen one of these events actually try and put on like a conference program as if you were there. So it starts at 8 o'clock in the morning and it goes on till 8 o'clock at night. They've got some really good speakers, lots of buyers, which is always key to these things. So wishing them luck with that. And the stuff I've seen, one or two technical hitches notwithstanding, has been really good. I thought Edinburgh's controller sessions were excellent, really well timed, and some proper, interesting, hard questions and hard answers that came back from the buyers there. I thought that was really well done. So just interested to see how these events, first of all, deal with the digital and what works and what doesn't. Like I say, Sunnyside and Edinburgh have probably worked best for me so far. But then when and how we come back. There are, in theory, still events that say they're happening between now and the end of the year. Hearing anecdotally that a lot of companies are basically putting travel bans on their staff for the rest of the year. And also anecdotally, people, even if they are allowed to travel by their company, are not in a big rush to get in an aeroplane and go off and spend time, at a television event, which brings people from all over the world into a very small confined space by its very nature. It's a proper little petri dish, isn't it? It'll be interesting to see if the events do come back at the end of the year. At the start of the year, it moved so fast. We didn't know what we were dealing with. Decisions were made, fair enough, but we kind of know what we're dealing with now. So if there are events towards the end of the year that are not happening, I do hope that plenty of notice and understanding is given, you can refund a distributor's ticket to an event, but you can't refund all their promotional material they have to print, their brochures. You can't refund their airfares. You can't refund their hotels. So, if things aren't going to happen at the end of the year, I do hope that plenty of notice is given. But I'm interested to see which events come out of this strong and which events don't.
In previous years, we've seen MIPCOM being the absolute cornerstone of the content industry, the global content industry, of which the whole industry is really revolved around that October date. It's pretty certain that it's happening. It's in both physical and perhaps digital format as well, maybe a mix of the two. Read Me Dem sent out a number of pieces of information about how that's going to happen in terms of face masks, in terms of distancing, in terms of meetings, how meetings are going to be arranged. And I'm sure there's going to be lots more of that to come. And actually, we're going to be speaking to Lorraine Gorod next week on next week's show. So it'd be really great to hear a little bit more about the detail of that.
Coming towards the end of June now, that story has been our most read story on C21 this month by 1,000 miles. So there's clearly a lot of interest in a MIPCOM happening. It would be amazing for the industry if it could happen. As I said earlier, all these companies that are telling me that they're tiding themselves along quite nicely now always put the point at which it becomes a different thing altogether at about 6 to 8 months, which is October and MIPCOM. So if we could get there in whatever form and have that, could be an amazing moment and fill it for the industry. Like I say, if we can't, I just hope that, plenty of notice is given so that companies can adjust and deal with that.
Sarah, you used to work at Read Me Dem, and you used to work at MIPCOM as well as being instrumental in launching MIP Cancun and MIP China and various other of their newer developments. How difficult will it be for them to stage MIPCOM this year under the current conditions, assuming, of course, that government conditions allow it post-September?
I think the problem is the uncertainty of all the sanitary conditions and the travel bans of the companies, the travel ban of the countries, and that makes it very difficult for everybody to protect themselves in this event. I've been talking with my Canadian counterparts, and they are really, everybody wants to go, like Clive was saying. Everybody is really looking forward to get back to presential and physical events, because that's the essence of our jobs. But they are really questioning the fact that the key element is the buyers. Will the buyers be there? Will they just be able to be there? I know they want to be there too. And what Read Me Dem is facing, I am facing too with TV France International, because we were holding our main event in September, and we have been obliged to transform it into a digital event, also because the people couldn't commit to be there in September in Biarritz, and we were not satisfied by the condition that we had to meet to hold this event. Taking off all the nice parts, having meetings behind glasses with masks, etc. It was not the spirit of an efficient market. So we are too waiting for all these markets to kick off again, and the sooner the better, because we can go through that for a few months, based on previous relationship, etc. But to launch new project, to meet new buyers, it's really complicated just on a digital form.
We've been talking to buyers a lot this week around Sunnyside, and they've said, well, we're able to keep up with our production contacts and people we've worked with before really easily, because you can just jump on a Zoom call. But it's that getting the foot in the door as a new production company or a new distributor, getting in front of broadcasters that you haven't worked with before. I think it's safe to say that the event calendar won't be as packed as it once was, and we were already having discussions about how green and sustainable it is being on a plane quite as often as we are. But the way television works, face-to-face in contact is absolutely vital as a way of meeting those people that you haven't worked with before and getting projects into new places. So that's the big thing at the moment. You can't replicate either with a digital event or with Zoom. It's just that chance meeting on the Quizette with someone that you haven't spoken to before.
I booked my flights yesterday to Nice. Many, many people in the industry are desperate for it to happen. I'm sure it's going to go ahead in some shape or form. we'll speak to Lorraine next week, and hopefully she can give us a bit more information on that. But certainly many of the execs that we've had this conversation with on previous episodes of Telecast have said, how keen they are for the event to take place. So let's keep our fingers crossed and hope it goes ahead. So now it's time of the show to look at your heroes of the week and who or what you're both going to be throwing in the bin. First of all, Sarah, tell us about your hero or heroes of the week.
Okay, so as heroes of the week, I want to nominate women in French media because there's been a lot of news around that. It's been so unbalanced in representation of women in media and diversity altogether that they have opened up a parliamentary mission to look into that and to raise awareness of the bias that were at work in the media industry. We have collaborated in that, and I hope we can just recognize that we have to work harder all together and not just women to best represent women, of course, but also all diversity and work towards more inclusion. In France, we had two media CEOs in place. One of her is leaving now, which is Arte's director, Véronique Kela. She has done a fantastic job after 9 years mandate, working on digital transformation of Arte, doubling the audience, and she's been very innovative and in terms of tools, content, etc., and really placed Arte on a kind of top of quality map in France. And there is also Delphine Ernotte, CEO of the French broadcaster, public service broadcaster, who and the presidency is ending soon, and she might be nominated again, but that's not for sure now. But during the lockdown, the public broadcaster has done a fantastic job keeping the link together. They have also worked towards digital transformation. Also, in terms of content, you can find now, very creative series on the platforms like Parliament or Stock, and so they have brought so many things in our industry that they need to be recognized, and that's just two examples. There's a lot more I could quote, but
so that's Delphine Ernotte and Véronique Kela are your heroes of the week. Fantastic. Okay, well, we wish them all the best, whatever their next steps are. Clive, your hero of the week.
I was going to go with the guy that collects my recycling bin at the minute, because that is a two-man job. Let me tell you. And we're disappointed they got rid of the NHS clap on a Thursday because it was providing a nice level of sound that we could drag that thing out under. But we're just left alone with our show now. In the end, I've gone for public service broadcasting just in general. I spoke to a few public service broadcasters this week for a project that we've been doing. It was under pressure before this, financially and politically, in quite a lot of countries. Right-wing governments, populist governments, it's having its reason for being questioned and its financing really under threat. That's going to continue, obviously, but I think during this pandemic, it's really shone through the importance of having a healthy public service broadcaster in your country. Things like educating kids who aren't in school. The BBC and others, RTE in Ireland, have just stepped up and done that. I've decided to go with them. The Peroni Brewery was also on my list of potentials for this, but I've gone with public service broadcaster.
Okay, all right, fantastic. Well, you can have both. That's fine. That's we're in lockdown, so we need to keep the Peroni flowing. Sarah, so who or what are you telling to get in the bin this week?
I want to put partly in the bin the GAFAM, who are, and the American state who are stepping off negotiation to find a common ground on taxation, etc. They are the kind of super winner of this period. We have all suffered, and I'd like them to take a more civil role in our lives, also participating in not just spreading the news and of course not the fake news, but I'd like to see them more responsible towards their audience, towards their mission, and not just taking off the financial ground on that. And they are key parts of our life. They are taking places in our kids' life that's going to be even bigger. And I'm quite anxious to see how they shape the world. So I'd like to see them more responsible in that regard.
Okay, so that's GAFAM: Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Clive, who are you chucking in the bin?
I'm putting the actor Lea Michele in the bin, but as part of a wider point, which I'll try and articulate now and tread carefully around. Lea Michele put up an Instagram post and a tweet and a Facebook and all the rest of it supporting the Black Lives Matters movement, and was immediately called out by Samantha Ware, who starred with her on Glee, saying, well, hang on a minute, if it matters that much to you, why did you make my first television gig a living hell? She wasn't the only one that got called out like that. Channel 4 have kind of set themselves up as the UK broadcast home of this movement, have been airing excellent short films and all kinds of initiatives. But also, when they expressed their support for the movement, again, people who worked on and starred in their flagship soap Hollyoaks then came out and said, well, hang on a minute, this was said to me and this happened to me while I worked on Hollyoaks. And the people that did that still work on that show. So I guess what I'm saying is, when movements like this blow up and explode, and what you often see is everybody immediately expresses support through social media. They put an Instagram tile up, they put a tweet out. And if it's not backed up with action, either historically or in the future, it can just look like you're doing it because your agent said it was a good idea. You're doing it because your PR said it was a good idea. We need to be seen to be doing this. Get it out. Fine, it's a good start. You're supporting the cause, but what are you actually going to do? I'm interested about what are you going to do moving forwards, because your actions speak louder than your words, really. That sort of thing. Television has a big problem, I think, with entry level. Whenever I talk to someone about how they got into television, they often say that it was a work experience position, an internship, or a runner position. That's an issue for me, because not only are those often handed out on a bit of a nod and a wink to a friend of a friend or a friend of the family, but if you look at it in the UK, simple geography and socio-economic reasons, who can afford to come out of school at 16 or 18 or 21 and take 6 months on one of those jobs, because they're either paid minimum wage or they're not paid at all, or you're paid expenses? Who can really afford to do that at that age? Simple socio-economic reasons tell you it's going to be a middle or upper class white kid who lives in London at home with their parents, because they're the only person that can afford to do it. So that's a tangible change that television could make really straight away to correct this imbalance. So Lea Michele in the bin, because I think she kind of typifies what television and football and other companies and industries can be guilty of, that, oh, this has blown up, we need to be seen to be supporting this, we support it. You don't actually do anything. And then 6 months later, another movement blows up, the news cycle moves on, nothing's changed, and they just crack on with another Instagram post about something else.
Nobody can disagree with that, Clive. I think you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of eyes are on the TV industry internationally at the moment to see how it moves forward with those changes. I've seen some announcements over the last couple of days by public service broadcasters like the BBC, who've invested over £100 million to try and address the inequalities within the corporation, and hopefully we're going to see that carried through in lots of others. We've seen Channel 4 has made an announcement as well. So
I would just add that I'm not standing on an ivory tower here chucking rocks at other people. The trade press needs to look at itself as well. The diversity in the trade press stretches about as far as Minori at Variety, who also happens to be the best journalist on the circuit. But apart from her, the trade press is very male and pale, and we need to look as well at, who are we interviewing? Where are we advertising our jobs? Who are we giving opportunities to? Who are we putting on panels? How many panels have you sat in where it's either all white or they have one BAME representative on the panel and they're there to talk about BAME issues rather than, industry trends and issues? There's so much needs to change, and we all need to look at. I'm well aware that I'm a middle class white kid, like talking like this, so it's not for me to say really, but there's so much we can do. I don't want it to appear that I'm chucking rocks around from my ivory tower here, because trade press needs to look at itself as well.
No, absolutely. And I think it's been a wake up call for many of us. So I think everybody's hopefully making those steps within their own businesses, whatever types of business they are within the TV industry and obviously wider as well. Clive, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us this week. It's been a pleasure to have you both on the show. I'm hoping to see you both at MIPCOM, and I'm sure we'll be speaking to you and seeing you in any case over the coming months. So best of luck with what you're doing.
Thank you. Bye.
Nice to see you both. Thanks so much.
Cheers. So it's time once again to go over to LA to speak to Peter White from Deadline. How you doing, Peter?
Hi, Justin. Yeah, I'm good. I'm very well. I managed to get my first haircut in 4 months, so very pleased with the way things are starting to reopen here in LA.
That's progress. That's progress. Well, we've just found today in London, they've just announced it. We're recording this on Tuesday, 4th of July, Independence Day. Obviously, we're going to have our Independence Day in London, so we'll be celebrating with you in a different way. The pubs are open. The haircuts will be done. We'll be out and about again.
I'll get on the British Airways website after we speak.
Excellent. Well, there's a place at the table, a socially distanced place at the table for you when you join us.
Good.
So I've noticed you've been doing a lot of stories about late night chat shows recently.
Yeah, look, it's one of the most fun beats I've taken on since I got here. Firstly, I'm a fan of the likes of Stephen Colbert and Trevor Noah. It's a really interesting side of the US television, which we just don't have in the UK. It makes me a little sad that the nightly show on ITV never worked. It's really fast paced. These are shows that are on 5 nights a week in most cases, and it's a very funny, tight knit community. There's lots of gossip and lots of that. So it's a really enjoyable side to this. We did a big virtual event this weekend. It was essentially our Emmys For Your Consideration event, which in the past we've held physically. This year we did it with all the talent and the creators online. We had over 40 shows, the people talking about their shows over the last year, trying to get nominated for an Emmy. And one of the things I did, I interviewed Trevor Noah. And he's genuinely a really interesting and funny bloke, and he's obviously making the Daily Show from home these days. He talked about even going so far as to extend his half-an-hour show to 45 minutes, even though he was filming it under quarantine. So that was a really interesting conversation. Similarly, last week I spoke to Hassan Minhaj, who does Patriot Act on Netflix, it's sort of Netflix's version of the weekly talk show. It's a little bit like The Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. He's a man who sort of reminds me a bit of John Oliver or Jon Stewart. And funnily enough, he moved his showrunner into his house so he could make the show under quarantine. So a wife who was very accommodating to that, and also talking about how they're going to handle the US elections. So it's been a really fun beat to get to know and try and figure out who's behind the scenes as well. There's also been a bit of a dark side in recent weeks. Both the Jimmys, Jimmy Kimmel and Jimmy Fallon, have had to apologize recently for blackface in both cases. Jimmy Kimmel on Tuesday coming out to apologize for sketches on his old Comedy Central show where he blacked up to be Karl Malone, a basketball player. And Fallon was a few weeks ago for a sketch that he did on SNL about Chris Rock. So, that's been a bit of a dark side to this. It sort of raises a question about diversity in the genre. That's one of the things that I'm working on right now. There's very few other than Trevor Noah, Lily Singh, who's on NBC, and Hassan. There's not too many people of color in this genre, but yeah, look, it's been a lot of fun getting to know these people.
I bet. And you say it's the FYC, the For Your Consideration season now. What's that like?
It's very strange. So, we've done this in the past where these people are campaigning in person, and this year they're doing it over Zoom. Essentially talking up their shows. You write a lot about the shows that have been over the last 12 months. For instance, I spoke to Michael Douglas the other day talking about the Kaminsky method, which was a fascinating conversation. This guy's got an incredible career. To talk to him about his latest Netflix show is a bit of a buzz. So he's got some very funny stories about that going all the way back. Essentially, it's them saying, "Hey, please nominate me." There's different phases, which I learnt. There's the people who know they're going to be nominated, who are saving themselves for the second phase because they want to win. And then there's the other smaller shows that would just like to be nominated. So yeah, it's a really strange introduction to all this, and this year particularly, because we don't really even know if the Emmys is going to be on in a physical form. Jimmy Kimmel, who we were just talking about, is meant to host it in September. I think they're still working out whether that's going to be a physical event, maybe with social distancing, or they'll do it over Zoom. So we'll see.
Yet another season in Hollywood. We obviously had Upfronts, which obviously was more New York based, but this year being virtual. We're now into FYC, but there's also the network schedule announcements as well.
Yeah, seasons. So FYC season, you have pilot season. These upfronts, or the quote unquote upfronts, in some way are still going on. Unofficially, I guess. ABC schedule launched last week, which is something they would have done traditionally in New York at their upfronts, but given what's been going on, they waited to sort of say what was going to be on their network in the fall. And even if there is a fall or autumn schedule, what's their big news is they're reducing their comedy blocks. They've got rid of that. They had a bit of a U-turn on a show called Blackish, which is Kenya Barris's comedy. They'd originally left it off the schedule, but given what's going on in America right now, they a few days later decided, after speaking with him and talking internally, that they should probably try and get that show on air, which it's one of those shows that really deals with race in an interesting way, famous for their Juneteenth episode and other episodes about social injustice. So they're putting that back on the schedule, but they still have reduced the number of comedies that they'll have. They're also putting The Bachelorette, which is one of their big reality shows, into that main autumn schedule. They're going to make it under quarantine, between now and then. So there's a lot going on. To be honest, I can't remember if there's any still left of these schedules and upfronts. I'm sure they'll just roll right into next year, and we'll go from there. The boss of ABC, Carrie Burke, told us as they were doing that she hopes this global pandemic, or one of the silver linings of this, is that they get rid of that traditional pilot season where there's a bit of a logjam for talent. There's a bit of a logjam for both on-screen and off-screen talent. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens, or if in 12 months, 24 months we go right back to it.
All right. Well, could be more disruption on the horizon in Hollywood. We'll wait and see. But I guess it's going to be a hard habit to break over in Hollywood. If you're doing your FYC season, well, we'll have to get Michael Douglas or somebody on the show with you next time, right?
I'll give Michael a call, see if he's up for another chat.
That's good. Well, I'm sure we can make room in the show for him. Peter, as always, brilliant to speak to you. Thanks for your time. All the best. Have a great week. We'll speak to you next week.
Thanks, Justin.
So once again, it's time to go over to Riga and catch up with Girts Licis from C21Media. How are you doing, Girts?
Very well, thank you. Trying to enjoy some proper summer here. Maybe you have tried out fishing bingo.
Fishing bingo. We talked about fishing bingo last week, and I tell you what, I tried Googling, can't find it anywhere. So whoever's running fishing bingo in Denmark is doing a fantastic job of keeping it off YouTube. This week, Girts, we're going to be talking about scripted.
TV series production has restarted in a few countries, including Iceland, Norway, Denmark, Austria, also in Spain and UK to some extent. And we are talking here about projects which have been commissioned by big internationals, mostly like Sky or Netflix. And they range from feel-good to thriller to apocalyptic shows. Netflix, for instance, currently has close to 300 shows commissioned and in various stages of production, which is almost double of its rivals like Disney or Amazon. And it hopes to get back to near normal before the end of September. So one of the reasons why productions in the mentioned territories and in the Nordics in particular have been able to restart so swiftly is that cast and crew on a Scandinavian production, for instance, is in average around 40 to 50 people, making them smaller and more manageable than some major Hollywood shoots. And I think this is one change we are going to see post-COVID quite broadly, that some big markets which have been quite, let's say, spoiled in terms of being able to afford big crews with each of its members responsible for some quite specific tasks at times, They just will need to become much more multitasking. People on these productions will have to become much more of kind of universal soldiers and learn multiple skills to stay competitive and basically to retain their jobs, like it is in most of the smaller markets. And I think that many professionals in countries like US or UK would actually be quite happy to diversify, to expand their roles. It's more about changing a certain production culture that's been around for many, many years. What's quite encouraging about these already resumed productions is that most of them seem to be able to keep within planned production days. And also the budget increase has been well below the so far projected levels of between 10 and 30%. The producers of Easy Money, which is a Nordic show for Netflix, are reporting that increase being in the range of 2% only. And this compares to 6 to 8% increase reported from Spain and around 10% in UK so far. So key expenditure going towards additional staff to ensure safety, of course, as well as more personalized catering and travel arrangements. The shoots are also becoming more eco-friendly. For instance, some production crews have gone completely paperless. They are also challenging the extent to which online can substitute the physical processes, with now in rehearsals with actors moving online. And in case of already mentioned Easy Money, a sex scene which is deemed integral to the story was not abolished. Instead, the producers made sure that the actors were comfortable to go ahead and tested them beforehand, of course. Same was the case with another Netflix project in Sweden, a romantic comedy, Love and Anarchy, with some screen kisses recorded even last month. But seriously, going forward, it may be necessary to check local regulations and choose the production locations depending on local rules in different countries. As in these cases, which I mentioned, the intimate scenes were made possible because, unlike in some other countries, people in Sweden are allowed within 2 meters of each other. And in terms of planning of the shooting process, it might be a good idea to push more complex, high-risk shoots to the back in order to make sure that they run smoothly, but also in hope that relaxation of the post-pandemic measures continues. And of course, one of the biggest problem areas can be scenes with lots of extras. The advice from the crews currently in production here is to book as extras people who are actual families, partners, or live together in real life. This will not only help to manage risks, but also can make their interaction more natural and therefore the scenes looking more realistic. And interestingly, some teams have found filming on locations, particularly in public places, currently being much easier to manage than normally, because streets obviously can be less crowded since there are very few tourists around at the moment. Some producers have also found that briefing teams in smaller groups is better, as people tend to be more focused and not asking as many questions as in big groups. And another interesting note I just remembered about catering, that people on production sets can get much more hungry and thirsty than one might expect. So it's important to make sure that there are lots and lots of extra portions available unless you want your crew to become really upset.
How about the content and the tone of these new scripted shows? Is it pure escapism, or are we going to be looking at drama reflecting reality?
Of course, programming people and commissioners are there to try and predict what kind of shows audiences will more likely to go for within the next year or two. And there is some evidence which makes us think that for the time being, lighter genres may be more in demand than before. But at the same time, there is definitely an audience for all the different shows when they arrive at the right time, at the right place. If we look at traumatic past events of comparable scale and impact, typically it has taken more than a few years to turn them into successful audiovisual works. And when it happens, the earliest responses to such past events tend to be autobiographical accounts that pay witness to history before the fictional works start to emerge. And even then, the drama is usually woven into some more specific story rather than picturing the event itself. And another interesting trend we might start seeing more in scripted is fiction with a purpose, if I can use, or perhaps even introduce such a term, as analogous to similar terms in the non-scripted space. There has been quite a lot of talking about factual or entertainment with a purpose, with a focus in the program switching from individual needs towards becoming more conscious about the whole society and the world surrounding us.
That's really interesting, Girts. So it's fiction with a purpose, or drama with a purpose. Do you think could be something that might develop as a trend over the coming years?
Yes, I believe so.
Interesting. Okay. Well, fantastic. That's a great look at drama and what's happening in the drama space. Girts, thanks so much for joining us this week. Enjoy the sunshine, and we'll catch up with you next week, same time, same place.
Absolutely. Talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Girts. Bye. Well, that's about it for this week's show. Thanks for listening. Please rate and subscribe to the show and share it with friends and colleagues. And if you want to hear about our sponsorship packages, please email justin@boomdialogue.com. That's justin@boomdialogue.com. We'll be back with another show next week. So in the meantime, stay safe.